And welcome everyone to this week's Radio Classics interview as we take a look back at the greatest games in the Nick Saban era. This is Roger Hoover with the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and we're glad you're with us for this interview coming up with former Alabama kicker Jeremy Shelley. This interview is brought to you by Alabama One Credit Union. They've been voted Tuscaloosa's best credit union and best mortgage lender. Alabama One offers low-rate auto, mortgage, and business loans, plus protection for it all with Alabama One Insurance. You can visit any of their 9 local branches or check them out online at alabama1.org. Alabama One, a proud supporter of Crimson Tide Classics, and we have Jeremy Shelley joining us via Skype on this Facebook Live interview. Jeremy, roll tide, man. How's everything going?
Roll tide, Roger. Hey, thank you for having me on today. I really appreciate it. Always good to go back and talk about some of the classic games.
Yeah, we've had a lot of them here recently as we look back to the Saban era and those early championships. Going back to the 2011 season, we had, of course, the great win for the Crimson Tide against LSU in the BCS title game where you were able to connect on 5 field goals. Everyone talks about what a low-scoring game that was, but you were a busy man that night in New Orleans.
Yeah, definitely. It was, personally, that was definitely, a career game for me. Top game in my career. Definitely one of the times when I really got to go out and get the spotlight on myself a little bit. But not to be forgotten how well our defense did that day. Going in and holding them to not even cross the 50-yard line. Only shutout, I believe, at the time in any of the bowl games, not to mention a national championship game. And then to come off of, we all know what happened earlier in the season with LSU and some struggles between Cade and myself. So, being able to go into that game and have a career game against LSU in the same season, to win the title, is absolutely the best feeling in the world.
I'm sure it is, and you mentioned the first game against LSU from that season, the quote-unquote game of the century, even though Alabama won the game that really mattered the most that year. Just what kind of night was that like for you guys? As there's already so much pressure and hype around a game of that magnitude, and especially when you're at home as well, but just for you and Cade, can you touch on what those night struggles were like at times, and even some good moments when you were able to connect?
So I personally went 1 for 2 on the night. Had a block. Actually I think on the block got hurdled by Eric Reed. So really tough things that went on that night, like you said. But I think the sentiment around the night, I don't think any of us were expecting to have that many field goals that were even, opportunities going into the night. Not to say any of us were unprepared or any less prepared than we'd be for any other game. But I don't think anybody would have seen that this was going to be a 6-6 into the regular time game, 9-6 overtime game. With no touchdowns, with how much talent was on the field that night between the two teams. So as we reflect back, that night itself, sure, weighed on you a little bit, but at the same time, it was the scores stayed so tight, and you were always so in the game that as a kicker and much like quarterbacks, you hear about it a lot. You have to have that short memory, right? You throw an interception as a quarterback, you need to be able to come back out for the next 4 downs when you get the opportunity and move the ball down the field. Hopefully, score a touchdown on that next drive. It's very similar in the kicking game. If I miss a field goal, the game's not over. I might miss a field goal in the first quarter, might miss a field goal in the fourth quarter. But if we're still tied or within 3 points or within 6 points, have a few possessions, that game can still fall on our shoulders. So I think throughout the night, you try to shake off those misses. You try to, not think about them, move on to the next play. The next play has a history and life of its own, as Coach always said. And that was the sentiment, throughout the game. In reflection, of course, it was a little harder coming out of there with the loss on top of it. And we definitely, had that 24-hour period where we sat back, took a look at what we did wrong, what we did right. We definitely did some things right throughout the night. Try to focus on those things, what we've been doing well throughout the season, and how we're going to turn the rest of the season around. It wasn't lost on us that we did have the opportunity to still go out for a national championship. We weren't sure, there was a lot of season to be had. We weren't sure how that season was going to play out. Fortunately, it worked out in our favor, and we were able to get that second shot at it.
Yeah, that must have been a really fun night in New Orleans as Alabama was able to move down the field some. The offense was doing some good things to set up all the field goals you were able to connect on, and that had to be a great feeling knowing you were able to connect after the offense set you up.
Exactly. And I think, one of my first field goals in that night was a relative chip shot, if you will. Always nice to be able to get your feet wet, dip your toes in the water, get the angst out a little bit. There was a lot of pressure on us going into that game, like we were saying from the game before. But also, it's a national championship game. There's pressure on everybody at the end of the day. So, it worked out really nice for me that AJ and the rest of the offense were able to really drive the ball down the field, get into the red zone, not leave us with as many, I would say, longer field goals, the plus 50s that we had in the game before. We were able to kind of mitigate those, move those maybe 20 yards closer, 25, 30 yards closer, kick a lot of really easy chip shots. Also, it made it easier for me to be warm and comfortable when time came. I think I had, if not my career long, but my career long at the time during that game, I think midway through.
It's one thing to win a national championship. It's another thing to repeat. How much were you guys able to kind of leave that game? You talked about the 24-hour rule. I imagine that's really the same when you look from season to season. You guys seem so motivated getting ready for 2012 to repeat as national champions and do what you were able to do the year before.
Yeah, a lot of that had to do with the leadership that was on the team at the time. Our senior leaders were going into, of course, their fourth year, going into the potential for their third national championship. A lot of us had been around for the 09 season. And I would argue, 2010 team, if you look at the roster, was one of our stronger teams. I don't know how much it really gets talked about, but if you look at the personnel on that squad, it was by and far, a very strong squad that didn't have the same results that the other three teams that I was a part of. So I think a lot of those seniors had a life lesson from coming out of 09. Seeing kind of how we responded. Sure, we responded well. We came back into 2010 ready, but I think we could have come, as the season played out, looking back, we definitely could have done a lot better. We could have, we had the personnel to win another championship even in that year. So I think some of those lessons from there going into the 2012 season, coming out of another national championship, being able to, like you said, reset that button going into the new season and with a different type of focus. We knew where we had messed up in the past. We knew where, maybe where some things slipped, where the focus had slipped in 2010. Let's make sure those things don't happen again in 2012, and let's see what we can do to, mitigate any really negative talk or any distractions like we could have potentially had going into the 2010 season and focusing on what's ahead.
And of course, for you, you went 11 of 11 in field goals, did not miss an extra point during that 2012 season, though. Why were you so consistent? What led to your consistency that year?
I think I personally hit a hot streak that year. I came out of school as well into the college senior combine and went, I can't even remember, I think it was 15 for 15 all the way back to 62 to win that combine. So, I personally, I think I was very much at a peak of my athleticism and what I was able to bring to the table that season. Additionally, kicking at the end of the day, it's a mental game. I just come out of, again, one of my career games, what ended up being one of my career games. And I think I did have a great deal of confidence coming out of that and going into my senior year. It should not be forgotten that while we look at 100%, 11 for 11, I don't look at any lengths of kicks that were on that list that I, quite frankly, would be happy missing by any means. Not that you're happy to miss any kick, but, my ranges were in that year. We were scoring a lot of touchdowns. My field goals that season, for the most part, I would put a lot of weight on, really kind of random stall outs in the red zone for the most part. So being able to not only have close field goals, had a ton of extra points that year. I think it was 69 on the season. When I look back at some of the statistics, I think that's a big calls to our offense and the way that they handled themselves that year and getting us into the red zone. And again, if you look at it, I did hit. I don't know of many kicks that Cade would have taken within that short range that season. If we had a few blowouts or anything like that, maybe he got a few reps. But I would have taken a majority of those, and we only had 11. So if you look at really, I don't know the stats on red zone of that season and scoring in the red zone and everything like that. I imagine it was pretty high, looking at scores and looking at how well the team did. But more importantly for me, led for a really easy life for me that senior year, kicking short field goals.
You touched on the mental approach that you had, and so many people when they're watching, they see the kicker come out with a holder, you get ready to go, and then you take your steps back, you get ready for the kick. Can you kind of walk us through every step mentally you would have getting ready for whether it's an extra point or a field goal?
Sure. So personally, I would focus on really the roots of what I'm doing. So there's probably three things that really at the end of the day are going to make or break me as a kicker, and that's going to be having my eyes down, having my eyes back towards the ball, following through towards the uprights, and really just maintaining a consistent momentum towards the ball. So in my head, 9 times out of 10, to be honest, you become doing the work that we do and doing it so often, you become what is deemed an expert. 10,000 hours, 10,000 tries at something, right? Being able to be an expert in that sense, you really try to black out and keep away from any of the mundane tasks that you're doing throughout that, right? So you want to put your body a little bit on autopilot. Use that muscle memory. Use all those reps that you've done. Trust in that practice. So as far as any of the outside influences, none of that was ever in my head. It wouldn't be anything like that. Whether it was first quarter, whether it's a 45-yarder, whether it's an extra point, whether it's to win the game, you want to keep that level head and you want to really maintain that consistency throughout every single kick. So running on the field, it's all right, let's focus on where do we need to put the spot. Let's focus on our steps, staying exactly where we need to be to approach the ball, and then just going back and thinking of, all right, let's make sure we take our proper steps. Let's make sure our plant foot's in the ground where it needs to be, and we're following through straight through the uprights. Every single time that I did that, the ball was going through.
Is there such a thing in your mind of icing the kicker?
By all means, I think in any role, in any sport, in anything you do, there's going to be folks who are I guess who can take a greater impact or create a greater impact of things like that in their head than some others. I think for myself, quite frankly, I never got the opportunity to hit a last minute game winner during my career at Alabama, which I guess sometimes can be a blessing in disguise. It's always fun to get the glory, but it's always fun to just go out and win games too. But yeah, I would say that it really depends on the kicker. Depends on the situation. Depends on how level set that mind is on the other end. Quite frankly, whenever I watch it, if you've got an extra timeout, you've got an extra 2 timeouts, why not take a shot at it? The one thing that would mess you up if it was me out there is that just gives me an extra practice shot at you.
That's certainly good. And then how much of your success as well can we point to Carson Tinker, your long snapper, and then A.J. McCarron was holding all those kicks for you as well. I mean, that's the starting quarterback, really the star of the team. You had to love that he was part of this process too.
I really did, and both of them, were a huge testament to all of my success. Carson, I can't remember a bad snap that he ever sent my way, so not ever having to worry about that is huge for my success and huge for my just the way that I would approach every kick. Being able to depend on a guy like Carson to always be there, always have the ball there where it needs to be, and we saw that with Carson going on to the NFL and having a great career in Jacksonville as well. Same thing with AJ. Really a blessing to have somebody with such a high football IQ. Also, just a great talent in general from an athletic point of view. To be able to pick up something like that, it's an outside. I would say it's an outside ask to be asking your starting quarterback to potentially get reamed on third down for a loss of 15 and roll over and start to hold a field goal. There were times like that where personally, I would approach it and think, all right, AJ, can you see straight? 2, are you really pissed off right now? Excuse my language, but are you really unhappy about this? And are we going to be able to focus on what the task is at hand here? And not once did he ever stray from anything like that, and was always focused to get the job done. I know there's a lot of testament. I was able to watch the 2012 national championship game, the LSU game we alluded to earlier, the other day on ESPNU during the workday. And every time I watch that, it reminds me more and more, how much effort AJ was putting into those kicks as well. Having my laces the right way, having everything the way it needed to be for me to do my job to step forward.
Well, that's certainly good. And again, you mentioned this as well. You kind of shared some duties with Cade Foster. What can you tell us about the friendship you guys have? Because you have to be able to get along to be able to split kicking duties like that, because a lot of schools and NFL teams don't do that.
Yeah, of course. I think it was really a luxury for us to be able to have 2 guys who have the competence and the skill level to be able to perform at a school like Alabama and perform in national championship games. It's not very often that you really have that flexibility, to be honest, to be able to have a guy in myself that arguably was a more consistent, not a bigger guy. I'll be the first one. You can look at me now. I tell people that I played football in college and I won a bunch of national championships, and they're like, "What? You were a kicker, right?" Okay, yeah. It's apparent. I'm not a big guy. I never had the big leg. I wasn't hitting the bombs. So being able to have somebody who not only took over the kickoffs, the big balls, right, that you can send everywhere, but also have maybe an extra leg on some of those longer field goals was a benefit to the team. Personally, between the two of us, we had a great relationship. Cade graduated early, a year after me in high school. So actually, I was only a semester ahead of him at the university. So we had the opportunity to not only compete at a very, very high level, of course, as he was coming in on scholarship that first winter or spring and summer going into my sophomore year, but also, Cade at his deepest core, and he carries himself this way at all times, is a great guy. He's going to compete with you. He's going to push you. And I think we pushed each other. We made each other better over the next 3 years, doing all the competition we had. But never, not once, was there any animosity between the two of us. Like you said, we had a job to work together. It could have gone either way. I'm sure we could have gotten our job done if we didn't get along too well. But we did, and I think that was a testament to the way that we carried things, the way that the team really was a team-oriented goal. We wanted to work as a team. We wanted to put everybody in the best position and have ourselves in the best position to win games. That was the way to do that, and we both really appreciated the opportunity to be able to step on the field that way.
And that leads us to the game that's coming across the state. Coming up on radio tomorrow is the 2012 SEC Championship game between Alabama and Georgia, and it's available now in podcast form on RolledTide.com. And you made one field goal in that game, and it was a crazy game. And when we talked to Carson Tinker last week, he talked about how that's probably his favorite game that he was able to play in that season, even bigger than some of the national championship games, because it was such a thriller. What do you remember about that night in Atlanta?
It was definitely a crazy night, having the opportunity to finally play Georgia. I hadn't been able to play Georgia in my career throughout my time in Alabama, with the addition of A&M and Mizzou. That actually ended up taking it off the table for 2000 for the final season, for the regular season as well. So that was really cool to do that. Not only that, but be able to play in downtown Atlanta. It was very reminiscent of playing LSU in the Superdome at the end of the day, having kind of that hometown feel for the opposing team. So, lots of energy in the stadium that night, lots of things going on. Everybody's flying around. Let's not kid ourselves. Georgia was a great team that year. That game was probably the national championship, like you kind of alluded to. Nobody's going to look at I can't remember the actual score of Notre Dame, 50-something to 13, I think. I don't think many people looked back on that and thought, oh, okay, that was a great national championship game. I really do think everybody looked back at this SEC championship as the end-all be-all of what that season really succumbed to. That being said, it delivered everything that it was designed to deliver. It was a long game for us. It was a long night for us, by all means. I think we, from what I recall, we had a very, very slow start. Not much scoring going on early. Like you said, I did have one field goal, but my time was mostly spent on the sideline cheering the guys on, which is could sometimes be a great blessing of the night. But yeah, I think, as I remember back to that game, it was one of the few times that we were really behind. We were behind, I think, 11 at one point, 21-10, really having to claw back, really having to climb back and turn that game around. We had some special teams plays, not with me personally, but with Cade getting the blocked return for a touchdown. I don't recall that happening at all within my career outside of that game. A lot of things that weren't going our way, and there was a consistent theme throughout my career that a lot of those types of plays would go our way. So coming into that game, having things like that kind of, not fall apart by any means, but have some of those balls not bounce in your direction, put us behind the eight ball a little bit, and it was really exciting being able to come back, have Amari make a lot of really big plays in that game, lots of other guys, really step up to the plate to make big plays in that game, and to come out with the win. I actually moved to Atlanta shortly after college, did a little stint with the Falcons, and then moved into software sales in Buckhead for a little while after that. But became good friends with a few guys who played in that game on the other side of the field. So really funny to be able to kind of twist that knife a little bit. But oh yeah, if you did make it out of bounds, maybe you get another play and we have a bigger game going on. Maybe we take it to overtime. Who knows? Maybe you guys go to win, but you didn't. So it's a lot of those conversations, much like speaking with the Texas fans for '09.
Yeah, imagine if Colt hadn't gotten hurt, what could have happened?
Exactly. We would have had it.
I mean, that final drive for Georgia had to be one of the most nerve-wracking moments. You mentioned your role on the sidelines kind of cheering, but I mean, your heart had to be in your throat watching that final drive for them.
It did, and it almost, it's almost like my levels had dropped a little bit because I was out of the game at that point. The last two or three or four drives, maybe, I can't even remember how quickly the scoring happened. Then we were down by 3 going into every single one of those touchdowns. So really, that's where I was getting a lot of weight on my shoulders, lots of thoughts, of course, getting ready, getting prepared. Hey, we might not score these touchdowns. We might have to come in and tie this game, turn this into an overtime type of situation. Again, like I said before, that 2012 team really knew how to punch it in the end zone. So that's what we did. Made my life really easy for that night. But yeah, watching them come down and I think they had 1 or 2 big plays during that drive as well. It wasn't like they inched their way down to what I remember. So all of a sudden it was like, oh wait, they're in scoring position. This isn't, this game's not wrapped up for us by any means.
Yeah, it's certainly a good celebration after Alabama wins, and I believe you got some hardware back there from that night.
Yeah, I do. Actually, one of my favorite pictures, Carson Tinker, who we talked about earlier, and me holding up the big SEC sign. I was able to sneak that one on the equipment truck on the way home, and then the 2011 national championship. Had some. Gathered a lot of things over the years from fans, from family, to just remember all of those great achievements and great nights. This one definitely near and dear to my heart, being able to hold that throughout the celebration and also have a ton of pictures of confetti falling on that while we're holding it up and having the night of our lives. So it's great that some of us were able to take some of those things home with us.
Well, as you can imagine, the next game in our Radio Classic series is the Notre Dame championship game down in South Beach, and you have a great emotional win against Georgia. What was the preparation like for that game? And then from really the opening drive, the game was Alabama's.
It really was, and I think there was even some talk about where we were staying in the hotel, staying in the Fontainebleau in South Beach, while Notre Dame opted to not use the team hotel, go I think an hour and a half, 2 hours away to do their training and really focus in on the game and everything. I think for us, that wasn't the position we wanted to take. It was, business as usual. We'd been here before. Like I said, the seniors on that team, this was their 3rd national championship. I think the nerves really weren't there for us. It was, hey, this is a business trip. This is exactly what we're here to do. This is exactly what we've been planning to do all season. And let's buckle down, focus on the task at hand. We are there for a week. I will say, we had our fun maybe night 1 or 2, and then spent the next 5 days getting ready for that game and really focusing on that game. Maybe even more days. I think we're there for quite a long time during those bowl periods. But really buckling down and focusing on the task at hand. Like I said, by no means do I think anybody in the locker room underweighed the opponent, and I think that shows to how we started so fast. I think there was opportunity out there to say, hey, Notre Dame maybe really doesn't stack up. Maybe they haven't played the teams that these other people have played. I think there was some even talk around that, right? Throughout the talking heads on SportsCenter and everything. Who should Notre Dame even be here? Type of conversation. Should Alabama be here because we had a loss that season? There's a lot of that conversation going on, and I don't think we really took any of that to heart. It was more so, hey, we need to go out there. This is a national championship. We need to play like national champions, and we need to go out here and win this game. And that's what we did. And to your point, coming out, right from kickoff from the first drive, being able to really, come out strong and continue that throughout the game, it, is a testament to the preparation that went into that.
And I'm sure another good celebration from that night. It turns out to be your final night wearing an Alabama uniform. Just what were those emotions like, knowing your career had ended, but it ends with a national championship, like you said, the 3rd you had in your career?
Bittersweet by all means. Like you say, it's the last time wearing the Alabama jersey. I think we just had our 10-year anniversary last season in Tuscaloosa of the '09 team. I guess not this season, but next year we'll have the 10-year anniversary of the 11 team, 10-year anniversary following that of 2012 team, and every year that passes by, the more you miss it, right? The more you miss the team camaraderie, the more you miss, I'm in business now, and I can't find or think of a business that can run with everybody everybody having those same goals and everybody fighting so hard for the same, for the same goals at the end of the day and for that same success. So being able to, so every day that passes by, you really miss having that camaraderie with your brothers, with your teammates. Also, the success we had, the time we had as superstar athletes, some of us still playing, of course. But I think leaving that game, we were very happy. Like you said, you capped off. I don't know how many schools, if any, or how many players were able to carry a name with 3 national championships. To their time spent at a university. So being able to cap it off that way, I think was great. We all had a great time that night. It went into my next goals, which, that game was over. It was time to focus on, potentially what next team I hope to play for. And I think within about a couple of weeks or a week or so, it was forgetting about that, moving on to what pro day is going to look like, what the combine is going to look like, and seeing what kind of impact we could make there.
Yeah, that leads me into kind of my final question as we start to wrap things up. What's life been like for you after your time at Tuscaloosa as Alabama's place kicker? And then how often do you get back to campus or get back to watch some games?
Yeah, so since then, I did have a short stint in camp. Went to OTAs in camp with the Atlanta Falcons. Spent some time with them. Did a little bit of arena ball as well after that out in Arizona with the Arizona Rattlers. So that's a fun game in itself, by all means, arena ball. If you ever get the chance to really watch it and pay attention to it, it's a whole nother sport. It's wild. It's a good time. But now actually living up in South Shore, Massachusetts, just south of Boston, doing software sales for a pharmaceutical R&D software company. So selling software to the biotechs and pharmaceutical companies in the area, in Cambridge, in the Boston area. So doing our part to see what we can do to provide tools for a lot of these folks actually who are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic right now, and even furthermore into, of course, cancers and everything like that. So really trying to taking the business side of things these days, and living at the beach, trying to do a little bit of surfing, living with my fiance and dog and cat here, having a great time at the beach, even though we're in quarantine. So definitely fortunate in that sense.
Well, that's certainly good. Well, you had a great career at the University of Alabama, 3 national championships, all the clutch field goals you're able to make, and especially when we look back on the 2012 season so fondly during our Radio Classics here over the next few weeks. Jeremy, thank you for joining us, man. Roll Tide.
Thanks, Roger. Roll Tide. Talk to you soon.
All right, that is Jeremy Shelley. We certainly appreciate him for joining us for the Radio Classics interview. We'll have more content coming up next week here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network.